Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are tackling a really technical stack of sources. We're going straight into the biochemistry of lipid synthesis, transport, and excretion right out of the necessary reading material. Our mission today is crystal clear. We're talking about cholesterol. Now, this is a complex molecule. I mean, it's essential for life, but its mismanagement also drives the majority of cardiovascular disease. So we're going to break down its entire journey, from its basic building blocks to how the body, throws it out. If you're preparing for a crucial exam, you're in the right place.
It's so vital to start with why this molecule is just so important. Cholesterol is an amphipathic structural component of every single cell membrane.
Amphipathic, meaning it likes both water and fat.
Exactly. And that property is essential for maintaining membrane fluidity and permeability. But it's more than just structure. It's the universal precursor for all other steroids.
All of them.
All of them. That's your corticosteroids, your sex hormones, vitamin D, and critically bile acids.
Okay, so if it's that vital for making hormones and, keeping our cells together, why does it have such a bad reputation? Why is it the villain? We know it's a major player in gallstones, but its main role in pathology is fueling atherosclerosis.
Ah, the hardening of the arteries.
The very same. The thing that leads to heart attacks and strokes.
Well, it's a classic case of too much of a good thing. We need it, but we also make plenty of it ourselves. Humans synthesize around 700 milligrams per day.
And where is that happening?
The liver and intestine do the lion's share, but virtually every nucleated cell in your body can actually make its own supply. And it exists in two forms: free cholesterol and then cholesterol ester, which is basically its fat-soluble storage and transport form.
Okay, so let's unpack this creation process. It's a 27-carbon structure. Where does an assembly line like that even begin?
The beauty of this pathway is its simplicity right at the start.
Oh.
All 27 of those carbon atoms, they all originate from acetyl-CoA.
Just acetyl-CoA.
That's it. The whole lengthy synthesis occurs in the cytosol and the endoplasmic reticulum, and we can logically break it down into 5 key stages.
Let's really focus on stage 1 for a moment, because this is where all the clinical relevance lives, right?
Precisely. Stage 1 is the biosynthesis of mevalonate. We start by combining 3 acetyl-CoA molecules in 2 steps. First, you get acetyl-CoA, and then a third acetyl-CoA is added via HMG-CoA synthase to form HMG-CoA. Then comes the crucial step: the reduction of HMG-CoA to form mevalonate, which is catalyzed by HMG-CoA reductase.
HMG-CoA reductase, so that's the metabolic security checkpoint. Once you pass that reduction, you're basically committed to making cholesterol.
You are committed.
But that's just a small piece.
Yeah.
Walk us through how we get from there to the final 27-carbon ring.
Well, think of it like this. Acetyl-CoA is the raw bolt. Mevalonate is the first assembled piece, a 6-carbon piece. In the next stages, stages 2 and 3, we burn a lot of ATP to modify that mevalonate and turn it into the active 5-carbon building block, isopentenyl diphosphate. Then 6 of those 5-carbon units condense over and over until we get a long 30-carbon linear molecule called squalene.
Wait, hold on. 30 carbons? I thought cholesterol is 27.
It is.
So stage 4 and 5 must involve folding that long chain up and then trimming it down.
That's exactly right. Stage 4, the cyclization to lanosterol, is just a magnificent feat of chemistry. Squalene is folded up, and a cyclase enzyme closes the rings to form the parent steroid, lanosterol. That's your basic ring structure. Then in stage 5, it's just about trimming off those 3 extra carbons and shifting some double bonds around to finally produce the 27-carbon cholesterol.
The sheer length and energy cost of this. I mean, 3 acetyl-CoAs just for the starting block, multiple ATPs, NADPH. It tells me the control has to be fiercely tight. But before we get to regulation, do any of those intermediates get used for anything else?
Oh, that's what's so fascinating here. The pathway supports much more than just cholesterol. Farnesyl diphosphate, that's the C15 intermediate right before squalene, is a building block for other key molecules like dolicol and ubiquinone.
Coenzyme Q.
Coenzyme Q, essential for the electron transport chain. And maybe most critically, farnesyl residues are used for protein prenylation. This is where these fat-living groups get attached to critical signaling proteins. It helps them stick to cell membranes, which is absolutely essential for cell signaling.
That makes the pathway even more central. Okay, back to regulation. If HMG-CoA reductase is the major control point, how does the body make sure we only build this massive molecule when we need it?
The control it's layered. There are 3 major mechanisms covering both long-term gene expression and immediate enzyme activity. The long-term control relies on a master switch, the sterile regulatory element binding protein, or SREBP.
SREBP.
So when cholesterol levels inside the cell are low, SREBP gets activated. It travels to the nucleus and it drives the transcription of the gene for HMG-CoA reductase.
Boosting synthesis.
Right. But when free cholesterol levels are high, that cholesterol actually inhibits SREBP, effectively repressing the gene and shutting down the whole assembly line.
Okay, so we're controlling the amount of enzyme being made. What about the enzyme that's already there? What about its lifespan?
That's where degradation comes in. A protein called INSIG, that's short for insulin-induced gene, promotes the degradation of HMG-CoA reductase.
Which makes sense if insulin is high.
It makes perfect physiological sense. Insulin signals a fed state, so the body has enough energy and can stop making cholesterol and start breaking down the machinery itself. And for the fastest short-term control, we have post-translational modification. An enzyme called AMPK senses low energy. When ATP is low, AMPK phosphorylates and immediately inactivates HMG-CoA reductase.
It just shuts it off.
Instantly. Conversely, insulin pushes the enzyme toward its active state.
And this dense biochemistry. This is why the statins are so effective, isn't it? They're the most widely used cholesterol-lowering drugs because they target that very first rate-limiting step.
Exactly. Statins, like orforglipron, are powerful competitive inhibitors of HMG-CoA reductase. By blocking this de novo synthesis, you force the cell to get its cholesterol from the bloodstream. And to do that, it has to increase the number of LDL receptors on its surface.
Speaking of grabbing cholesterol, let's talk about that overall cellular balance. The cell has to decide between getting it from the outside uptake and storing it, or getting rid of it loss. How did that internal decision-making happen?
That decision is highly dependent on the concentration of free cholesterol inside the cell. So gain factors are things like synthesis, uptake via the LDL receptor, and breaking down existing stores. Loss factors are using it for steroids, esterifying it for storage with an enzyme called acetyl-CoA, or effluxing it out to HDL.
The LDL receptor is key for uptake. But you said that if cholesterol inside the cell is high, the cell suppresses the receptor gene via SREBP. That seems counterintuitive. If my blood cholesterol is high from my diet, shutting down my receptors means I can't clear it from my blood. Doesn't that just create a vicious cycle?
That is a brilliant observation, and it highlights this internal versus external dilemma. The cell's primary goal is cellular homeostasis. So when the cell senses it has enough internal cholesterol, it shuts down synthesis and it tells the outside world, I don't need any more, by reducing its LDL receptors.
And the unfortunate side effect for the body is that LDL just hangs around in the plasma longer.
Precisely. And this brings us to a newer and critically important player, PCSK9. This protein is fascinating. It literally targets the LDL receptor for degradation. When PCSK9 binds to an LDL receptor, it makes sure that receptor gets destroyed instead of being recycled back to the cell surface.
That is a critical insight for therapy. If you inhibit PCSK9, you are essentially increasing the number of active receptors on the cell, which would supercharge the cell's ability to pull LDL out of the blood.
Exactly. PCSK9 inhibitors are a major new class of drugs because they improve the recycling of the LDL receptor, maximizing plasma clearance.
All right, so let's shift from the cell's private stash to public transportation. How is this fat moved between organs in the blood?
Well, it can't just float around. It needs to be packaged in plasma lipoproteins, VLDL, IDL, LDL, and HDL. LDL carries the highest proportion in humans. It's the delivery service, supplying cholesterol to tissues outside the liver.
Okay, that's delivery. What about the cleanup crew, the return trip?
That's reverse cholesterol transport, and it's mediated by HDL. HDL removes free cholesterol from peripheral tissues and takes it back to the liver for elimination. This whole process is driven by an enzyme called LCAT, which is associated with HDL.
So LCAT takes the free cholesterol picked up by HDL and immediately converts it into cholesterol ester. Why is that conversion step so important?
By esterifying the cholesterol, LCAT traps it inside the core of the HDL particle. This action continually decreases the concentration of free cholesterol on the HDL surface, which creates a very powerful concentration gradient.
Like a vacuum.
It acts exactly like a vacuum, constantly pulling more free cholesterol out of the peripheral cells and maximizing the cleaning capacity of that HDL particle.
So HDL's collected all this cholesterol. How does that collected fat get back to the liver for disposal?
That transfer relies on the cholesterol ester transfer protein, or CETP. CETP is basically a swap meet. It facilitates the transfer of cholesterol ester from the good HDL to the bad VLDL and LDL particles in exchange for triacylglycerol.
Ah, so it's a way of routing all that collected cholesterol back toward the liver.
Exactly. It hitches a ride on the VLDL remnants, or LDL, which the liver then takes up and processes.
Which brings us to the final step, excretion. We can't actually break down cholesterol in the body. So how do we eliminate it?
The body only has one way out, through the bile, either as unchanged cholesterol or, more importantly, after it's converted to bile acids in the liver. The first and rate-limiting step for this conversion is the 7-hydroxylation of cholesterol. This is catalyzed by an enzyme called cholesterol 7-hydroxylase, or CYP7A1.
So that's the disposal decision point.
That is the commitment step for getting rid of cholesterol. These bile acids are then conjugated with glycine or taurine to form bile salts before they're secreted.
And once those bile salts hit the intestine,
Yeah.
the system throws a wrench into the disposal process, right? An efficiency wrench.
It throws a massive wrench in the works. This is the enterohepatic circulation. The body's goal is survival and reuse. So 98 to 99% of all bile acids are reabsorbed in the ileum and returned to the liver. This whole pool cycles 6 to 10 times a day.
A day. Wow.
Which creates a critical paradox. Because we reabsorb so much, only that tiny fraction, the 1 or 2% loss in the feces, represents the major excretory route for cholesterol from the entire body.
Let's connect all these biochemical threads back to health. We talk about high cholesterol, but what's the parameter that really matters for coronary heart disease risk?
Well, elevated total plasma cholesterol is a major factor. Anything consistently above about 5.2 millimoles per liter promotes atherosclerosis. But what's truly predictive is the ratio. Because HDL is the cleanup crew doing reverse cholesterol transport, high concentrations of HDL are protective. This makes the LDL-HDL cholesterol ratio a much better predictive parameter. You want that ratio to be low.
And what are the levers you can pull to manage these levels, besides what you inherit genetically?
Diet and lifestyle are hugely influential. Nutritionally, replacing saturated fats with poly or monounsaturated fats, things like olive oil, fish oils, is beneficial.
And what's the mechanism there?
Well, unsaturated fatty acids lower cholesterol, in part by upregulating LDL receptors. They help your body clear LDL more efficiently. Lifestyle-wise, regular exercise increases HDL and lowers LDL. And then you have the major risk factors: high blood pressure, abdominal obesity, smoking, chronic stress, all bad news.
So, to summarize the therapeutic targets, we have statins blocking the synthesis checkpoint. What about other major drug classes?
We can also block absorption from your diet. A drug called ezetimibe works by inhibiting a protein that absorbs cholesterol in the intestine. We also use fibrates, which are mainly for lowering triacylglycerols. And as we detailed, the newest and most impactful strategy involves targeting PCSK9 to prevent LDL receptor degradation.
And finally, we have to mention, sometimes the system fails because of inheritance. What's the classic example of a disastrous genetic failure in this whole pathway?
The textbook case is familial hypercholesterolemia, or FH. It's a severe inherited disorder causing premature atherosclerosis, and most often it's due to a defect in the LDL receptor gene. If you can't make a functional LDL receptor, you simply can't clear LDL from the plasma.
So you have extremely high circulating cholesterol right from birth.
From birth, it's a very dangerous condition.
That was an absolutely essential tour through the lipid highway. Let's quickly distill the 3 most important takeaways. 1. Cholesterol is synthesized exclusively from acetyl-CoA, and this complex process is fiercely regulated at the HMG-CoA reductase step, which is why statins are so powerful. They block the committed step. 2. Cellular balance is a tight internal negotiation. When the cell is full, it suppresses SREBP, shutting down synthesis and uptake. This can paradoxically increase plasma cholesterol, and new drugs like PCSK9 inhibitors exploit this to maximize clearance. And 3. Excretion relies on conversion to bile acids via CYP7A1. And while the body recycles 99% of those acids, that small fraction lost in the feces is the only real way to get cholesterol out of your body.
And if we just connect that to the bigger picture, understanding the precise molecular interplay between the LDL receptor, SREBP, and PCSK9, that provides a powerful foundation for understanding why cardiovascular medicine is constantly pursuing new targeted therapeutics. The control mechanisms are the disease drivers.
Absolutely. So as you integrate this knowledge, here's a final thought. Consider the interplay between those 2 main transport vehicles, LDL for delivery and HDL for cleanup. What would happen if a patient had a genetic deficiency in LCAT, the enzyme that esterifies cholesterol and HDL? How would that break the reverse transport cycle, and what would the cholesterol profile in their blood look like? Think about that concentration gradient. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
We appreciate you learning with us.